Ask someone why Nokia collapsed, and you'll usually hear the same story. They became a lazy, outdated hardware dinosaur that refused to adapt, and Apple crushed them. But this chart shows Nokia's R&D spending in million euros. Look at the massive upward curve starting in the late 90s. They were pouring capital into engineering, peaking at over 6 billion euros right as the iPhone launched. They outspent almost every rival. That capital produced real results. In 2002, Nokia engineers successfully demonstrated a 3D user interface. By 2004, years before Steve Jobs took the stage at Macworld, Nokia had already built a working smartphone prototype with a large touchscreen, which presents an interesting problem. How does a company with the most resources, the largest engineering budget, and the earliest touchscreen prototypes completely fall apart? The collapse had nothing to do with a lack of engineering talent or raw innovation. Nokia suffered a total architectural breakdown. As a business scales its logistics to supply the entire globe, that massive footprint requires management. This creates the growth paradox. The exact scale that makes a company successful actively breeds a fatal level of complexity. Nokia's corporate hierarchy became incredibly bloated, expanding to include over 300 global vice presidents. They implemented a matrix structure where basic decisions required sign-offs from multiple managers. Approving a single software feature took months as employees navigated endless meetings. They had built a flawless global hardware supply chain, but entirely lost their internal metabolism. Infinite engineering resources are useless if your internal bureaucracy moves slower than the market. By the time their engineers actually built the future, the management structure was just too slow to ship it. By 2007, the industry stopped competing on physical hardware specifications. The market shifted entirely to software and third-party developer ecosystems. Nokia treated software developers as vendors to squeeze for margin, charging a €200 certification fee and demanding more than half of app revenue. Compare that to Apple, who offered a clean 30% split and a massive customer base. Developers made the obvious financial choice. They abandoned Symbian entirely, taking their software to iOS and Android, where the margins actually made sense. A hardware platform cannot survive without third-party software, and you cannot tax an ecosystem into existence. While Apple operated with extreme discipline, building one premium device for the high-end market, Nokia attempted to dominate every microscopic consumer demographic simultaneously. This bar chart tracks the number of individual Nokia phones released by year. Look at the sheer volume of releases clustered between 2006 and 2011. In total, between 1995 and 2013, they pushed an astonishing 406 distinct models to market. From an operational standpoint, this volume is disastrous. When an engineering team has to release dozens of phones a year, they cannot properly optimize the software, the interface, or the marketing for any device. That means 406 scattered, unpolished Nokia models were competing against exactly 5 highly refined iPhones released over a similar critical time span. By attempting to be everything to everyone, they diluted their brand and guaranteed they meant nothing to anyone. As the consumer mobile division collapsed, the executives who remained at Nokia made a cold, mathematical decision. They swallowed their pride and completely abandoned the consumer wars that built their name. Today, they operate as a highly lucrative B2B giant, pivoting entirely into global telecommunications networks and 5G infrastructure. Instead of fighting expensive, low-margin retail battles against Apple and Samsung, they capture billions in high-margin patent licensing and back-end data networks. True corporate survival requires the operational discipline to step back from past glory. If you can no longer win the gold rush, you stop digging and you start selling the shovels.